What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So, James Gunn's Superman film has been in theaters for roughly a week now, and I've seen it twice. I obviously love the film, but how does it rank against the other Superman films? That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to give any spoilers for the new Superman film, but I feel like any other Superman film is going to be fair game. So if you haven't seen a Superman film, there's a good chance that, no promises, it won't get spoiled for you, basically. But without further ado, let's see how I rank all of these, worst to best. This is just my opinion. It's not objective. I'd love to know yours in the comments down below. But with that said, let's get right into this. Coming in last place is going to be Superman 3. I know that might be a hot take because I know Superman 4 is a very, very disliked film. But for me, I watched Superman 3 maybe like anywhere from 4 to 7 years ago for the first time. And I actually thought it was okay on first viewing. But then watching it again a couple weeks ago, I just gotta say, I feel like the humor, just the comedy in general just felt very lackluster in my opinion. It really makes Superman the secondary character in his own film. I mean, Richard Pryor, I don't know anything that he's been in. I've never seen any of his stand-up comedy acts. I've really only ever seen him in this film. But he just takes over every scene. He's literally the Jar Jar Binks of the Superman franchise. Not hating on the actor himself, obviously. He was just getting his paycheck. But yeah, just the lackluster comedy really took me out of this film. It was like the worst comedic Marvel movie on steroids. And, I don't think it's the worst DC film ever made, in my opinion, but it might just be one of the most forgettable DC films, maybe even superhero films ever made. The evil Superman storyline, it did have some potential. There are some really, almost kind of, not dark humor, so to speak, but, there's some moments in there that are kind of entertaining and bitingly funny. There you go. That's really the best way I can put it. But, the potential of that evil Superman arc and seeing this darker side of Clark Kent, it really gets overcrowded by just all the more humor and a villain that really should have been Brainiac. I don't even remember what they called this villain, the computer, sentient computer, whatever it is. It just didn't work for me, and apparently I remember reading something about this movie and they were going to include Brainiac. Not sure why they didn't just stick to that original plan, because that movie, just having Brainiac in this movie would have at least somewhat elevated it, probably above Superman 4 for me. And I do like that Clark sacrificing his relationship with Lois at the end of Superman 2 isn't actually undone here. I do appreciate that they actually made that feel like a legitimate consequence. And it wasn't like, 5 minutes into Superman 3, they're going to completely undo that and make that ending to Superman 2 feel feel wasted. They don't do that, but everything else, in my opinion, is just extremely forgettable, unfortunately. But moving on to 6th place is going to be Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. It's definitely cheesy. It's definitely campy to a fault. And don't get me wrong, Nuclear Man feels like a complete waste when we could have had literally any other Superman villain that wasn't Lex Luthor. And I gotta say, even Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, who I do like in these films, even he feels a bit overused by this point. The visuals look absolutely horrid, and they look ridiculously fake and amateurish, even by 80s standards. I mean, as a point of reference, I think the 1978 film looks much better by comparison. So yeah, this is not a good film whatsoever. It's definitely a really bad movie, but that said, it's still a bit more fun, in my opinion, than Superman 3. And honestly, I think the scariest, but maybe also one of its slightly redeeming qualities is, while the storyline about Superman basically ending the Cold War and basically interfering with human affairs, what could have been such a highly dated storyline about nuclear arms and the Cold War between Russia and the US, somehow it feels more relevant today than it did at the time of its release, which is honestly kind of sad. But yeah, and I can definitely see as we get into, the newer Superman films, specifically James Gunn's Superman, I can definitely see where they kind of took the whole idea of Superman getting involved in foreign affairs and the consequences of that and really played into that in the new film. So I do appreciate that this movie seems to more or less kind of have influenced that film, that it kind of took its better elements, for lack of a better term. But yeah, it's still not a very good film whatsoever. It's not one that I think I would go back and rewatch unless I had to do like another ranking review or something. But kind of moving on in 5th place, and this is where pretty much from here on out, I would actually say most of these films are either really good or just straight up amazing. But yeah, coming in 5th place, Superman Returns. I do think that this is a really worthy sequel slash reboot of Christopher Reeve's first 2 entries. There's definitely a very fun plane rescue sequence, like late first act, early second act of the film. However, I do kind of feel like that really cool sequence is the highlight of the film. So it's one of those where it kind of, similar to how a lot of people would say Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, it kind of blew its load too early, so to speak, and had the really awesome skyscraper, Tom Cruise climbing the skyscraper sequence midway through the film, and the rest of the film just didn't compare by comparison. This movie definitely suffers from that. But, I mean, outside of the plane rescue sequence, there's so many other positives here. Kevin Spacey, say what you will about him as a human being, which is kind of the way it is with most celebrities, if we're being honest, but he absolutely crushes it as Lex Luthor. And I think Brandon Routh, while I haven't seen a lot of him lately, and I think now he's just relegated to Hallmark movies, basically, he definitely fills Reeve's shoes near flawlessly. Like, you really buy this as basically being Christopher Reeve Superman, which he was apparently supposed to be. But yeah, kind of like the Reeves films also, I thought this was a very character-driven story that it had at its core. And it had some really good plot twists, and especially involving the son of Lois being Superman's biological kid. I thought that was pretty cool. However, once again, there's kind of similar to the Superman 1978 film, there's pretty much almost no action scene aside from the plane rescue sequence. There's also not really too much of a showcase on Superman's actual powers outside of maybe his flying set. And I do feel like the chemistry between Lois and Clark here is nowhere near as strong as the likes of, say, Reeves and Kidders in the older Superman films, or Cavill and Adams in Man of Steel, or David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnan. But yeah, kind of moving on to 4th place, and I'm going to put this one here as, let's see, I got a little out of order on my notes, but yeah, Man of Steel. I really debated on this one, and, growing up, I would have said this probably was my favorite Superman film, and if not, it would have definitely been like top 2 or 3. But rewatching it now, I feel like while it's still a really good movie, and I do like this film more than most, I mean, I've definitely had a soft spot for this film, but I just feel like I have more of an appreciation for the other ones higher up on my list, especially 2 and 3. I've just kind of appreciated them a lot more as I got older, and again, I've always had a soft spot for this film. I think Henry Cavill and Amy Adams, they have really great chemistry together. And honestly, at the time that this movie came out, it had far and away the best action scenes of any Superman film to date. It was visually stunning. The flying sequences were phenomenal and absolutely carried this movie. And love it or hate it, it did give an overall fresh take on the character, despite some very divisive elements like Clark letting his father die in the tornado, just Pa Kent's very, for lack of a better term, questionable moments that he had with Clark, telling him it's okay to let a bus full of kids die if it means you get to hide your powers. And, obviously there's the infamous Superman killing Zod sequence at the end of the film, which, again, I don't in isolation really dislike either of those, but especially with what we got with the new Superman film, it really just, I think, kind of made me not dislike them, but it kind of lessened its value, for lack of a better term, because you kind of realize, yeah, I think it's really a testament to how good James Gunn did Superman 2025, that, in retrospect, you go back and you're like, yeah, that just doesn't feel like Superman. But, I mean, that said, it's still a really good movie. It's still worth watching, and it does give, again, a fresh take on the character. So it is a really cool film. I'd recommend watching it or giving it a rewatch if you haven't seen it in a few years, especially if you've seen the new Superman film, just to see how it compares and how it differentiates. But, yeah, moving to top 3, this is where the fun begins. We have the original Superman film, 1978. Obviously, guys, this film was revolutionary at the time, but I do have to say, in some ways, it doesn't hold up quite as well as some people make it seem. I know a lot of people that would still put this as like a top 5, maybe top 10, top 5 comic book movie of all time. And to a certain degree, I understand that there's a lot to like about this film. I mean, Christopher Reeves and Margaret Kidder are electric together. The visuals at the time were revolutionary, and they definitely made you believe a man could fly. And Gene Hackman definitely makes for a solid Lex Luthor. Also, it feels very personal and character driven, something that I think a lot of people probably weren't expecting for a character like Superman way back then. And, just the very character driven aspect of this film, I feel like created the blueprint for nearly every comic book film that followed. Even Kevin Feige's gone on record for saying that they basically frequent this movie a lot as a source for their MCU films. And when your rival comic book studio is basically copying you, or not only copying, but using you as a blueprint, I guess you could say, for their movies, that means you did something right. And so, yeah, overall, it's definitely one of the most influential films of all time. But I will say it does take a little while for the story to get going and to even really see Superman. We don't really see Superman himself until an hour into this film. And kind of like with Superman Returns, there's no action scenes that really showcase how powerful he is outside of the flight scenes that, definitely don't hold up as well as, say, Man of Steel or some of the newer films. They were great at the time, but, even then, they don't hold up quite as well, obviously, being 50 years old. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it's still a really good Superman-focused story. I just think it works in a lot of ways. The romance, the characterization of Clark Kent, and Christopher Reeves is obviously one of the most iconic. He portrays the most iconic fictional character of all time, in my opinion, absolutely flawlessly. But that said, as much as I do like this film, I will go ahead and say Superman 2 comes in second place, baby. And I'm going to be reviewing the Donner cut because that's the most recent one I've seen. I think I've seen the theatrical cut once or twice, but I'm most familiar with the Donner cut. So we're going to go Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut more specifically. And to me, this movie took everything that I liked about the prior 1978 film, the character study, the flying scenes, the relationship between him and Lois, the breathed and lived in world of Metropolis, and it really felt like that movie on steroids. We actually get to see Superman use his powers and kick butt, and we really get to see him humanize the Man of Steel in a way that we haven't really even seen before. Even the original film, there was such a genuine love story between him and Lois at the core of this movie. And really, I love how it shows these sacrifices of being the world's most powerful being, kind of showing hey, Superman's undefeatable. He's one of the most powerful heroes of all time. But how powerful is he going to be compared, when it comes to protecting Lois and the people he cares about? And I just think it does a really good job of that, kind of really exploring the psychology of Superman, and should Superman choose to give up his basically immortal, all-powerful life to live with this woman, or, should he continue to protect the world? And it's just, in my opinion, Christopher Reeves at his absolute peak. It just was an overall great film, and honestly, was my favorite Superman film for the longest time, until last week. Because coming in at number 1, if you haven't guessed it already, is James Gunn's Superman. I adored this film. I watched it in theaters opening Thursday night, preview night, I guess you could call it, and absolutely loved this film. Went and saw it with my mom the following Saturday. Loved it just as much, if not even a bit more. To me, it just combined everything that has worked about every single Superman film, and it just ratcheted it up to an 11. It was, I still think it's the most comic book film of all time. It feels like a Silver Age comic come to life. James Gunn found a great way to give us a really character-driven Superman story, but he also didn't self-indulge in a lot of the humor, at least in my opinion. I know some people kind of differ on that perspective, but for me, and considering this is one of my biggest fears going into the movie, I feel like he did not overindulge himself in the humor. It felt perfectly timed. Krypto, I would die for Krypto, quite honestly, if we're being honest here, and I think Nicholas Holt's version of Lex Luthor, while I like Kevin Spacey as Lex, while I like Gene Hackman as Lex, while I can't think of his name, but the Lex Luthor and Superman and Lois, I think this might just be the most terrifying, brutal, on-screen performance we've ever seen anyone give for Lex Luthor, in live action at least. It just, everything, so many moments, I would just lean over to my friends and be like, that's Lois Lane. That's Clark Kent. And again, I just love, it seems to me like a lot of things that people didn't like about this film, I actually really like. I like the twist of Clark's parents basically telling him to go and, basically become Omni-Man and take over the world. And I like how it had to be Superman rising above that. I really just, again, I think the chemistry between him and Rachel Brosnan's Lois Lane was just really, really great. Jimmy Olsen, by far the best Jimmy Olsen we've seen in live action, which isn't a super high bar, but yeah, it's just overall great. They did a great job of getting people to really relate to Superman, which, again, another thing a lot of people didn't like was the fact that Superman gets his butt kicked so many times throughout this film. But to me, it just made the moments where he did kick butt so much more impactful, and it really made him relatable. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think this movie got a lot right. I think it's the perfect Superman film. Yes, you could definitely nitpick certain aspects of this film. It is a bit overcrowded. It kind of does try to do a bit more than it could handle at times. But overall, it's still, in my opinion, quite possibly a top 10 comic book movie of all time. It's one of the best DC films in years. And for the first time in probably since Batman v Superman, to be honest with you, have I been this curious as to where the DCU is going to be headed. So yeah, overall, that's my list. Just let me know how wrong I am in the comments down below. Just remember, I know I said Superman 1978 isn't a top 10 comic book movie of all time, but guys, remember, I still really like the film. I'm just being honest here, you know. Don't come at me, guys. But I'd love to know what you all think down in the comments down below. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for putting James Gunn's Superman in first place, but hey, it's fun. It's just my list, and I want to see yours. So yeah, just thanks for making it as end of this video. And if you like what you've seen here, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And I will catch you all later. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. If you liked what you've seen here and you want to see more, please feel free to like, subscribe, share, and check out my other videos in the link in the description down below. And I will see you all later.